Welcome everyone. In this video, I'm excited to talk about this investment. This is one of the ones that I'm most excited about in my portfolio. As you guys know, I look for companies that I think are relevant. They have good products. They have great business models. They are companies that are growing rapidly. They have a total addressable market that is not just some niche group of people, but it's the whole world. I want the whole world to be able to use their products. I look for companies like Disney that has Disney Plus that appeals to everyone in the world. I want companies like Netflix that has global appeal as well, or whether it's Google that has YouTube that people all across the world use. The company we're going to be looking at today is Spotify. It is the leader in streaming audio entertainment with podcasts and music, and it's growing rapidly. It's trading at what I think is undervalued. I think that the company's heavily undervalued, and I think it will grow substantially over the next 10 years. In this video, I plan on going over this investment, why I like the investment so much, why I like the company so much, where I see it going in 10 years. We're going to take a look at what I've looked at with this company and the growth rates and the kind of market dominance I think it will have over the next decade. We're also going to address some of the many arguments that the bears and the pessimists bring up. The music labels, they're going to take all the profits of Spotify. Spotify hands all their money over to the music labels that own all the music, right? That's one of the big criticisms. Another one is the big tech companies. Spotify is up against Google, Amazon, Apple Music. These are huge, well-funded, smart companies that have tons of programmers, and they're competing against little Spotify. How can Spotify possibly beat these guys? I'm going to explain how in this video. So we have a lot to go over. I'm going to go over this entire investment with you, and I'll try to explain why I'm investing so much into this company. So let's go ahead and jump right into a video here. This is the founder and the CEO of Spotify. So something you guys know is that I like companies, especially growth companies that are founder-led, meaning the person that started the company, that grew it to the size it's currently at, is still currently leading it. And the reason that I like founder-led companies is not just because it sounds good to be founder-led. You know, it's not one of these just fun things to say. The reason I like founder-led companies is because almost always, when you have a founder-led company, their time horizon and their view of what they're trying to accomplish is much longer. It's a much more long game. When you have CEOs that you just bring in from other companies, almost always they have a shorter viewpoint. They're looking at the next quarter, how to get the income up, how to get the operating margin up. We need it up next quarter. That's how I get my bonuses. That's how I justify coming over here, is by having a better quarter. When it's founder-led and they've been running the company for like 10 to 15 years, they don't care about next quarter. They care about dominating the next decade. So founder-led, not just something that's fun to say, it's actually very important. This company's founder-led by Daniel Ek, who, go ahead and read his Wikipedia page. The guy's a genius. I think he clearly is a genius. But let's go ahead and hear him talk about his company, Spotify.
Hi, I'm Daniel Ek, the founder and CEO of Spotify. Wherever you're watching from, wherever you are in the world, we're really glad you're joining us. Today, we want to show you what's next for Spotify and for audio. But before we talk about where it's all going, let me say a few words about where it all started.
He's going to talk about the growth rate of Spotify. So just look at how he's been able to grow this company. He identified a need very similar to Jeff Bezos and Amazon. He's good at identifying what people want that they don't yet have.
I spent my childhood in Rågsved, a short distance from here. And at night, I'd stare up at the ceiling in my room and I'd dream of faraway places. Someday I'd hope I'd travel the world. But until that day, it was music that carried me there. Before I ever got to Britain, Led Zeppelin showed me around. Before I ever set foot in the United States, Bob Dylan gave me a tour. With nothing but a pair of headphones, music took me places I'd never been. But something about sound still transfixes us all. The desire to create and connect through audio is foundational to the human experience. And I don't believe it's a coincidence that the basic unit of music, the beat, echoes the human heartbeat. For Spotify, audio is our history and it's our future. In 2006, the music industry was collapsing. Piracy was killing it. The idea that all music should be free.
He just said in 2006, the The music industry was collapsing and piracy was killing it. Let's go ahead and take a little break from this and just look at a graph that illustrates that. Here we are. Here's an image that illustrates what he was saying in 2006. Let me go ahead and go full screen here. Right here is 2006. This bar, if we look right there. So it started off here, and you can see the music industry. This is like the total revenues over time. It declined from 2006 to 2007, and it had been declining for about 5 or 6 years before that. So in 2006, it declined. In 2007, it declined. In 2008, it declined. And granted, most of the revenue at this time was like physical sales, right? It wasn't digital sales. So it kept declining in 2009 and 2010. And then in 2011, it kind of held steady, and then it continued to decline until about 2014, because this blue area right here, go full screen again, this blue area, that is streaming. Guess what is helping the music industry turn around? Going from a systemic decline to now growth year over year at a very rapid pace. Notice that the blue portion here, which is streaming, is surpassing everything else. We have like physical sales, right? Concerts and that type of thing. We have CDs and physical media, and then we have streaming. This is beating out everything else. So that's what he's talking about. There it is illustrated.
For the taking, no matter the cost and effort, destroyed the careers of a lot of working artists.
He just said that a lot of people treated music like it's free for the taking, meaning that they had piracy. Piracy was rampant in the early 90s and 80s. I even remember how easy it was just to get on Napster, and you could just download any song you want at any time. You didn't have to pay for anything. And of course, that doesn't work with the music industry. They're making no money having that happen. So he doesn't mention that here, but he actually knew the guys that were running Napster, and he understood the problem very early on, because he's a young guy. He knew how piracy worked, and he understood that people that were pirating music, I don't think it was much of an issue of the price as much as it was the convenience. They liked how convenient it was to download the music that way, rather than dealing with CDs and picking out the specific songs you wanted.
We believed there had to be a better way, so we founded Spotify. And we knew our platform had to be nothing short of revolutionary if we were going to stand a chance of getting people to abandon piracy and pay for music again. Spotify would have to be faster, more responsive, and more personalized. And it would have to be a more exciting and engaging way to listen to music.
Faster, more responsive, exciting, and engaging. It's a software. He turned the industry into software. Software usually wins out. And engagement on Spotify is way more than any other competitor. The average Spotify listener listens to Spotify substantially more than Apple Music or especially Amazon Prime Music. It's like 10-1.
15 years later, we are more committed than ever. We still believe in audio first. We still want to be the soundtrack to your life. And if you're an artist or a podcaster with a song to share, an album to drop, or even a story to tell, we want Spotify to be the best place for you to find an audience. And it is, because our platform is wired for connection. It's connecting listeners with the audio they love and connecting creators with the fans who find meaning in their art and who won't just follow their career, but will sustain it.
Spotify is a platform. It's an aggregator. Typically, those do well as investments in today's environment. If we look at companies like Roku, they aggregate streaming onto one platform. Reddit is an aggregator of communities. Any company that works in that sphere seems to do well. And when he talks about connecting artists and creators with an audience, that's the same thing that YouTube does. Spotify is doing a similar thing, using algorithms, tweaking the software, making the user experience better and better, but they're just doing that for audio entertainment first instead of YouTube, which has done it for video entertainment. So it's a valuable product to be able to have a platform in the first place, but doing it for the entire music industry, I think, is very important.
These goals reinforce each other. A more connected, more engaged community of listeners creates more demand and more opportunities for artists and podcasters to make a living from their work. And the more people we're creating, the more there is for our users to discover. It's a virtuous cycle, a flywheel.
You see how he actually mentions a flywheel. That is that's a growth investor's favorite thing, is a flywheel, a virtuous cycle. It's where one thing reinforces the other, which reinforces the other, and makes it so the company compounds. That's what you want with growth companies, is internal compounding. The same thing we've seen with all the companies I talk about. I look for companies with flywheels. With Netflix, it's that the more subscribers they have, the more they can fund content. The more content they have, the more users sign up, right? Which goes into a circle. And then it also has a competitive advantage where if Netflix has a lot more content than their competitors, they can price lower per user and still outperform other competitors, have a better value proposition. So when Daniel Ek is talking about a flywheel, he's saying that as more people use Spotify, it makes it so that there's more social buzz around it. More people are sharing playlists that they can only share if they're Spotify users. That creates a competitive advantage that compounds over time. Not only that, but they get a tremendous amount of data. More people that are heavily engaged in music are listening to Spotify. That gives Spotify all the data, not Apple, not Google. Google doesn't have the data. Apple has some of it through their users, but Spotify has the most data to be able to sift through and make playlists and do all sorts of things with, to adjust their algorithms. So Daniel Ek is somebody that's understood the flywheel of his company very well, and he's used it to compound it over time.
And it's propelling Spotify and the audio industry forward. Over the past decade and a half, what we've seen and helped drive is an audio renaissance. And I use that word intentionally. It really is a renaissance. And what it is not is a restoration.
Yeah, he's phrasing this setting up for the amount of growth that Spotify's causing. And he firmly believes that we're not going to go back to where just the DVD era was, but it's going to surpass it by a lot. And I agree.
We're moving forward, not turning the clock back. People love to look back fondly on the music industry of 2 decades ago. The era of the record store and FM radio, a time before piracy. And I understand the nostalgia, I get it. As a kid, I remember spending hours at my local record store, flipping through the bins and selecting what albums to buy. But looking back, what really strikes me is how limiting it was. The amount of music you could discover back then was limited by shelf space and floor space, by the physical distribution capabilities of music companies, by the personal preferences of our radio DJ, and of course, by where you lived and how much you could afford to spend.
I remember growing up as well, even just, in the late 90s, if you listen to the radio, you get the idea that the radio really plays like the same 30 songs over and over again. And you start just hearing the same broadly appealing generic songs over and over again. Spotify does not do that. When you have your daily playlist, it's fresh music tailored to you every single day. And I find a lot of music that's music I really end up liking. And it's surprising because you think you have your taste in music, you have your favorite bands, and then all of a sudden you discover a song that Spotify recommends that is so good, better than anything you've listened to, and it's pretty incredible, but it makes sense because of the technology we have is so much better. Everything that he's saying is true. It's vastly better than it was 10, 20 years ago.
There were also fewer possibilities for creators. The shelves and the airwaves could only support so many artists, and industry gatekeepers could only invest in so many artists. A lot of great music was put out in the 70s and 80s and 90s, but unfortunately, many more never got a chance. Over the past 2 decades, streaming has fundamentally changed the audio ecosystem. It's lowered barriers to entry, and it democratized access to audio for listeners across the world. More creators are creating and succeeding than ever before. 20 years ago, the music industry was a pretty restrictive club. Unless you had the resources to produce a physical product and distribute it to record stores and get your song on the radio, it was difficult to break through.
This is something I'm going to loop back to later, but one of the biggest concerns for investors in Spotify, one of the reasons that people don't invest in it, is what he's outlining is that the music labels 20 years ago controlled all the distribution, all the promotion, all the advertising, all the production. They had the studios and the professional studio equipment that nobody else could afford, and they were the key to creating music. So the music labels still own a lot of music, and Spotify pays them royalties for the music like crazy. They pay them the majority of their money. 60% of their revenue goes to the music labels. So that's a huge concern for investors in Spotify, but I believe that that will not last forever. That's going to change once you realize that Spotify is now doing all the things that the music labels once did. All that distribution, all that production, all the advertising, all of that's done by Spotify. Spotify allows artists to create music. It allows artists to distribute it. It allows algorithms to help people discover new music. All that offering that the music labels once provided, now Spotify's doing all of it, and the economics that reward these companies will follow suit eventually.
Case in point, back in 2002, just over 30,000 albums were released in the US, and only 8,000 sold more than 1,000 copies, representing 98% of sales of new releases. By comparison, in 2020, 1.8 million albums were released on Spotify in the US, and 6 times as many albums represented 98% of the streams for these releases.
That makes sense what he's saying, that Spotify makes it so that the music industry isn't so top heavy. Spotify does have some popular playlists, right? They have some that you can go into and you can listen to the top 100 songs. Those are very top heavy playlists, right? They're just the most popular artists. But Spotify allows lesser known musicians to get exposure. It's much like what YouTube has done with the cable industry. You'd never have a show like the Joseph Carlson show before YouTube. It'd never exist. All you would have is, you'd have CNN and Fox News and those guys. That's what you'd have. Very top heavy. All the news would be funneled between a few people at the top, and it's changed. YouTube has changed that. Spotify is doing the same thing for the music industry. It's making it more balanced out. It's not such a top-heavy pyramid where just a couple people at the top dominate all the rankings and they're the only ones that get listened to. So not only is Spotify a good investment, but it's also doing some cool things for the world. It's making it so that music is actually getting distributed more evenly and other people have a chance. It's a pretty amazing thing that's happening.
So it's not just the possibility that more artists can be heard by a global audience. It is that more artists are being heard. This means that meaningful income is flowing to more artists than ever before. When Spotify launched in Sweden in 2008, the combined market of physical and digital music sales amounted to about 17 billion. Streaming represented 300 million of that, or only 2% of the sales globally. And at the industry's low point in 2014, the combined total dropped another 3 billion to 14 billion. But with streaming, we've helped the global music industry go from contraction to growth. In 2019, the total revenue of the recording industry was just over 20 billion. And more than half of that revenue, 11.4 billion, came from streaming.
So streaming went from, what did he say, 2% to now over half of 20 billion. It continues to grow and eat more and more of the pie. I think that streaming will soon be like 90%, and the rest will be, the rest of the revenue will be like, merchandise sales and concerts, right? And then most people will be using streaming.
And here's what that audio renaissance looks like from our front row seats of Spotify. Since 2008, Spotify has expanded from 1 market to 93, and from thousands of listeners to more than 345 million, and from paying out approximately 500,000 to creators in 2008 to paying out more than 5 billion in 2020.
These numbers are incredible. Paying out from 500,000 to 5 billion, that amount of growth is absolutely insane. This company is a growth monster. It is scaling across the world. It's pretty incredible to see, and these numbers don't lie. They really illustrate this.
Our platform has grown exponentially, and it's going to keep growing. We didn't want to confine our app to some walled garden, to just a few devices.
Apple. He's taking shots at Apple. They can find their apps to mostly be an extra value add to their ecosystem. As much as I like Apple as an investment, I use basically all Apple devices. I have an iPhone, I have an iPad, I have a MacBook. I have a PC, but I have a MacBook as well. I like Apple products. I like Spotify more than Apple Music. That's my opinion. I've used both of them extensively as I've looked into this investment, and I think that Spotify makes a better music app overall. There's pros and cons, but I end up always going back to Spotify.
Our users have a nearly limitless choice of devices. So to meet them where they were, we needed to be everywhere. Today, Spotify is available on more than 2,000 different devices. Everything from smartphones to smart speakers, and from car audio systems to gaming consoles.
One thing I'll mention about the fact that they're so compatible on everything is this is a huge advantage. It's a hidden advantage to Spotify. Because they are the default on so many devices, it has somewhat of the effect of SiriusXM in car audio. Whenever you buy a new vehicle, it will give you a trial to SiriusXM. The reason they do that is because people end up just signing up for it. They enjoy it. They say this is kind of nice to have, and then they sign up for it and have it for the long run. They have a subscription business. When Spotify is available on all these devices, thousands of different devices, everything that you buy, every device. When you buy a car, you have Apple CarPlay. When you buy a Roku, when you buy an Xbox, whenever you go to the App Store, it's always Spotify there. And a lot of times it's like pre-installed on the device. That gives them free signups. People that they sign up for free, and then they're one of the ad-supported users. So Spotify makes money with them through ads, but when people sign up for premium, over 60% come from the free signups. So the fact that they're so big helps them grow. It doesn't make it more difficult for them to grow. The fact that they already have so much recognition and they're the default on so many devices helps them continue to grow at scale.
And that spirit of innovation is stronger than ever. 3 years ago, Spotify had 3 million creators on our platform. Every year since, that number has increased from 4 million to 5 million to 8 million at the end of 2020.
Okay, so 8 million at the end of 2020. Take a look at his prediction of what they'll have in the future. If you want to think of a aggressive prediction for the amount of creators that he wants on his platform, let's go ahead and listen.
I believe that by 2025, we could have as many as 50 million creators on our platform.
So in 5 years, he thinks he's going to increase the amount of creators on the platform from 8 million to 50 million. So when people talk about, big companies and they're going to slow down their growth and they've already gotten to scale, they don't realize technology companies. They have 345 million people. There's billions and billions of people out there outside of China that can sign up for this app. It has incredible growth possibility. I think it's really in the early stages of its possible growth.
Whose art is enjoyed by a billion users around the world. And that's not a prediction or a goal. It's really both a challenge and a great opportunity. We're in the midst of an explosion of audio creation. The early innings of what we see as a truly global creative economy. In the coming years, as more and more people become audio creators, Spotify will enable the best of them, the ones that are highly driven, highly talented, and resonate with a group of fans to grow their audience and build their careers on our platform.
And one thing I'll mention with this ambitious goal and this ambitious challenge of getting 50 million creators on his platform, I think that he's right in saying more and more people are going to be audio creators. There's a new podcast made every second of the day. There's people coming out with new podcasts. I didn't think a couple years ago that I would have a podcast or a show, but every episode of the Joseph Carlson Show is uploaded on the podcast. It's uploaded on Spotify. And a lot of people do enjoy it on Spotify. I can look into the analytics and we get thousands of listens every single episode. So I've been doing that since the beginning. And again, a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have thought that really would have been a thing, but now it is. I'm one of the creators on his platform getting thousands of people to listen.
We want to be the place where educators and entrepreneurs and storytellers and authors, well-known personalities and artists are all able to reach out and touch the world through audio. And that brings me to Spotify's mission: to unlock the potential of human creativity by giving 1 million creative artists the opportunity to live off of their art, and billions of fans the opportunity to enjoy and be inspired by it. That's been our aspiration, the point on the horizon that we're striving toward. And yeah, it's ambitious, but it's also essential. If the creative economy is going to thrive, we need to ensure that audio creation can be a profession and not just a side project.
That's super important. Look, I'm one of those people now. But like some of you know, I've moved mostly over to just doing YouTube. From a profession that was a very high-paying profession. I was at what I think is probably my prime in programming, making a very good salary, and I was able to give a lot of that up, able to move out of that type of job that was a very cushy job to pursue creation, to pursue doing something that's a creative activity. And platforms like YouTube, especially in this case, was able to make that possible. If Spotify is able to do that for audio creators, for people that make music or people that make podcasts, that is an incredibly ambitious a goal that will change a lot of people's lives for the better. Usually, products that are able to do that kind of change, they get rewarded in the marketplace. They'll be profitable. And he's saying here that he understands that in order for people to be able to do this full time and really make good music, good podcasts, and good entertainment, they need to be able to focus on it full time. And they need to be able to make a living doing it. He's basically saying it's great to be creative, but we have to make money at the same time so people can afford to do this.
Today, we're going to show you how we're empowering the most talented creators in the world to turn their passion into a profession. But before I pass the mic, I wanted to say a few words about the goal of bringing audio to the world. Spotify is currently available across nearly half of the world, but there are still millions of creators and billions of listeners who don't yet have access to Spotify. So I'd like to share some news. Over the next few days, we'll be expanding Spotify's global footprint significantly. This move will make Spotify available to more than 1 billion people in new markets around the world, with nearly half of them already using the internet. A little later, we'll tell you more about what that will mean, and when we do, I hope you'll remember it's just the beginning.
That was really big news. Basically, he's saying that they're increasing their markets to 80 new markets from already what they're open to, offering it to over 1 billion new users. And Africa, the whole continent, every country in it, is one of those markets. Now, not everybody has internet there, but like he says, like over half of them do have internet. And Spotify is one of these things that anybody that has a cell phone, there's well over 1 billion people. There's like a billion and a half or something like that have smartphones with internet access that live outside of China that could potentially sign up for Spotify. The total addressable market is gigantic, and they're expanding their markets, offering it to more and more people. Now, continuing on, he caps off this little segment here. And by the way, this is just from like a month ago, so this is very recent. But he caps this off with what I think is the most important part of everything that he said, which is basically his ambitions for the future and how he thinks 10 years from now we'll look back at this moment. So this is the type of CEO you're dealing with. The guy that has built Spotify for 15 years to be the global leader in music streaming with over 345 million subscribers. And this is the direction that he wants to take the company and how he views this time in history.
Years from now, I believe we'll see this moment for what it really was, an overture. The first brilliant moments of a new golden age of audio. For creators, for listeners, for Spotify, for audio, the best is yet to come.
That's how he views this. And, you know, you could argue with him on it. Maybe you don't view things the same way, but this is the type of thing I like to invest in. CEOs that are founder-led, that have these extremely long-term ambitious goals. Daniel Ek isn't sitting around wondering how he can squeeze some few operating margin or some income out of his subscribers over the next 90 days, right? That's not what he's doing. He says that we're going to look back fondly at this time point. 10 years from now, and we're going to think, look at this. Streaming was just a little infant at this point. 2021, we were just getting started. Look at the entire giant dominant industry we made. Now everybody, by default, has a streaming app, and Spotify has the biggest market share because we spent our time creating the best service. This is the type of company I like to get behind. When I'm looking for big growth plays that I think will be massive companies in the future, you have founder-led, ambitious CEOs that are incredibly intelligent, they're driven, they're very much into the company. They are present with it. They're not off doing something else. Daniel Ek has ran it from the beginning. He's extremely ambitious, and he obviously has very aggressive goals of where he wants to bring streaming in the future. If you don't agree with what he's saying, or you don't think it's going to pan out, you don't think he's going to be successful and accomplish this, then you shouldn't invest in this company. I'd say you could write off the investment right there if you don't think that Daniel Ek will be able to execute in some fashion on these goals. I agree with him. I think that he has the best chance for success. It's not guaranteed, but out of the options available, I think that Spotify has the positioning, the leadership, the market share, the platform, the reputation to be able to be successful. I think it's the best chance. I do not think that Google's music or YouTube music is going to take over Spotify or Amazon offering one more thing in their huge plethora of things they offer with Amazon Music is going to be able to beat Spotify. And then Apple, which has made it their biggest goal to move into services, I still think that even though, in my opinion, Apple's the best competitor to Spotify, I think Spotify reigns supreme in this territory. They are the premium. They are the best in it. Apple is second place because Apple does a million different things, and they've tied Apple Music heavily to their ecosystem. Spotify is universal. They can go to Africa and Europe. They can go to Android devices and Apple devices and Xboxes and everything in between. Apple Music is much more tied to people's ecosystem. It's bundled in with other products. It doesn't have as much engagement as Spotify does. So this, generally speaking, is the ambitious goals of Spotify. But this isn't just a CEO that sees it as a pie in the sky. He's not just dreaming about something that I think is unrealistic. He's driven, and he's going to accomplish it because it's a realistic goal. Now, I'm going to do a deep dive into valuation of Spotify and just some of my projections in the future in a different video because I don't want this one to be 2 hours long. Well, let's go ahead and just look at a couple of the numbers with this company. I'm very much bought into the goal of it. I think that it really has a good opportunity, but we need to look at the stock price. Is this company incredibly expensive? Is it just out of there, right? You just can't buy it because it's too expensive? Well, it IPO'd back in 2017 for $147 a share, and over that time, over, let's see, half a year, 1.5 years, 2.5 years, 3.5 years, 4.5 years, 5 and almost 6 years, it's gone up 85%. That's the enormous expensive growth of Spotify, not even going up 100% over like a 6-year period. This stock is not expensive. Not in my opinion. It's not an expensive stock. In fact, it's quite cheap. Spotify today has a market cap of $52 billion. The company that might be the global leader in audio entertainment in 2030, where there's over 1 billion people signed up for this service, is selling for $50 billion. Think about what companies are selling for more than $50 billion. There's a lot of companies that don't have any chance to have the opportunity Spotify does that are selling at premiums much higher than it. So my opinion, just on, just some quick math with this, I think it's incredibly cheap. Another thing we can look at is the revenue growth of it. Because when a company like Spotify is in the early growth stages, it's really not focused on profitability. Don't get me wrong. If Spotify wanted to be heavily profitable right now, they could change things, become more profitable. Daniel Ek has been asked about this, and he says that they're really not focused right now on profitability. They're reinvesting every source of revenue, every bit of income into things that are considered expenses, which makes them not quite as profitable. So that's a good thing. They don't have to pay as much taxes. They're growing the company better. And right now they're focused on the long-term goal. But don't get him wrong. Once this company accomplishes scale, he will focus on profitability. Like he says, in order for artists to make money, in order for the company to be viable, it does have to be very profitable. So we look at these numbers. Right now, Spotify's focused on growth. Revenue growth is growing steadily. This is SaaS revenue, reliable revenue from a SaaS subscription company with a high retention rate. It's recently $9.6 billion in 1 year. Again, this company's worth $50 billion, and now it's revenuing close to and probably at this point over $10 billion a year. It's growing its revenue at 27% year over year, and this company's selling for $50 billion. Obviously, a couple years ago, it was still selling at $20 billion, but it's still a steal. I think this company is a good deal right now. So I plan on doing a more in-depth look at the valuation, but this is my bull case on Spotify. I think it's an incredibly good opportunity. I think the company is growing rapidly. It has a massive TAM. It has a great leader of the company, a great team. The competitors, Apple, Amazon, the projects they're doing with music are side projects. Spotify is focused solely on their application. That's the only thing they're doing is music. So I think they have an incredibly good chance of being successful. I'm going to go and do updates on Spotify as we see the story unravel and we see their subscribership growth and their revenue growth over time. But this is one of the key positions in my portfolio. I plan on adding more to it if more of the sell-off continues during this tech sell-off. I'll be adding more to my position, but this is one of the companies that I'm the most excited about. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little look into Spotify. I hope it was entertaining. If you can do me a favor, check out the Patreon. There's a link underneath. If you like this type of content, you can join that. You also get access to a Discord community. We talk about investments like Spotify every day. I argue with some people on it that, they give me different viewpoints and different opinions, and it's pretty fun to discuss these things. So if you're interested in that type of thing, you can check out the Patreon. Other than that, if you haven't already, Webull's giving away the free stocks, so you can click on that link as well. If you deposit $100, they'll give you a couple free stocks. And if you've done all that, I appreciate you guys for listening, and I'll check in with you next time.